Welcome back to Troubleshooting Agile. Hi there, Jeffrey.
Hi, Squirrel.
So I think we were going to continue from last week where we were talking about skiing. Now I know nothing about skiing. The only thing I know about skiing is that if you're sat in the chalet sipping something hot, there might be some entertaining people falling down outside. So that's about all I know. But last week we talked about some interesting mistakes you had made and what you'd learned from them when you were sort of being the skier yourself. But then just at the end, we got on to your friend who had been learning how to instruct people. And he actually wasn't as good at instructing as he'd like. There were some interesting mistakes he was making in his instructing. Could you remind us
Yes.
about that? And maybe we can talk with people about, talk with our listeners about how to improve their instructing.
Yeah, absolutely. So this situation was at the same day I was making mistakes about some very fundamental things of getting the wrong skis. Um, I had a friend who was getting certified as a level one cross-country ski instructor, and this was a fairly formal process, very formal. And he had a 3-hour ski with the person who was the certifier, and then the certifier took about an hour to write up, fill out a form, and detail their feedback, and then about another hour going through that feedback with my friend who was getting that. And part of the feedback he got was that while he was very skilled in his own skiing and had good mechanics and technique and form, that he needed to improve some of how he gave feedback to people. For example, one example was on their biomechanics, how their bodies was arranged and where they were trying to move things. And then that you as you said, there's like something interesting here about the meta skill of um, teaching, and how even people who might be very skilled practitioners might struggle to convey those skills to other people. And I think there's some elements there, which is they may not have it actually requires a different kind of learning. Learning how to do a thing and learning how to teach a thing are actually different skills that need to be developed. And I think you've had some experiences of that in your own background, about the gap between being able to do a thing versus teach a thing.
Oh, absolutely. I was a graduate student at the University of California at Berkeley for my sins. I could tell you lots of stories down the pub sometime about how difficult that environment was in many ways. But one of the most wonderful things I got to do was teach calculus, which you might think is not what grad students want to do. But I really loved it because I'm a natural teacher. I really like doing it. I come from a family of teachers. This is really sort of in my blood. And I had a class, a section that was underneath a professor. The students would go to the lectures with the professor, who was internationally famous. I mean, had solved problems you can read about in fancy books, had won medals, all kinds of stuff like that, and was absolutely incredibly brilliant at everything except teaching calculus. And so they would come to me completely confused. These were business students, by the way, who were not sort of motivated to learn calculus. They were motivated to get a grade and get out of there. And so his abstruse explanations, which were expert level, assumed many things that were just not natural to them at all, and they needed a much more slowed down version, much more simple version of what they needed to learn. In the same way that I think your friend was getting feedback. Hey, you ski down the mountain really well. You can move the poles in this particular way. You got the technique, but you're not explaining it. You're not showing people. You're not moving their hands and helping them in any meaningful way. So you got to get better at that.
Yeah.
So just to give an illustration of how I did that, and we'll link in the show notes to an article, a newsletter I wrote about this some time ago. What I invented was various entertaining, strange, or memorable names and techniques and rules for the people in my class. The one I remember most was something I called the Squirrelmobile. And the Squirrelmobile was me. It was me pretending to be a car. So you can imagine me running around the classroom making vroom vroom sounds. And so I would run from one
I can
end to
actually
the
very
other.
easily imagine that.
Yes, you know me. So here I am running around, and I would run someplace, halfway across the room, and then I'd say, "Oh, I forgot the milk," and then I would stop my car, vroom, make braking sounds, and then make vroom vroom sounds the other direction. Well, that was a parabola. That was a graph that had a maximum, and that was where the derivative was 0. And this is the sort of things that the professor would just glaze over in about 2 seconds, but
Yeah.
the students needed much more information, much more knowledge, sort of something to hang off, a framework. And he struggled to do that because it was so natural to him. He didn't need a framework at all. He probably had needed it, when he was, I don't know, 10 years old and learned about this or something, because he was a genius. But they were not anywhere near genius level, and they needed something that was simpler for them. The point I'm making that might be relevant to our listeners is that when you're teaching, say, pairing or elephant carpaccio, so you deliver software every day instead of once every quarter or something like that, just telling people and showing them, hey, here's how they can do it, there's other teams that have done it, go off and do it, doesn't work. Because what people need is frameworks and tools and names for things like the Squirrelmobile, like mechanisms for moving their hands on the poles so they know which way to go. Does that make sense, Jeffrey? Have you seen the same thing or something different?
Absolutely, and I think we've talked many times before about shu ha ri coming from Aikido, and the idea of shu level learning is you should just do what the instructor tells you. Ha is where you have mastered enough to the point you can now choose among techniques. But what you're describing here is sort of like shu level instruction, and ri is level transcendence. So you kind of have the story of the instructor who is at ri level, and the students are at shu level. They need to be they need very concrete things to do, and which I'm reminded of Karate Kid, and the people might who've seen the movie probably remembers there's sort of the wax on, wax off scene where the instructor this or it has essentially has the student doing a bunch of chores. He's got to paint the fence, he's got to wax the car, and the student's getting very frustrated by the fact he's not learning karate. But then it's revealed that what he's been doing is giving a bunch of tasks that is building muscle memory of the kind of motions that he needs to do. And that's what I'm thinking of from your example is um, the breaking down the to the component skills and giving people concrete hooks and concrete instruction that they can follow at their level of, I would say, knowledge or ignorance. They don't that the person didn't know karate, but they at their level they could understand painting a fence or waxing a car. And does that resonate with what you have in mind with the Squirrelmobile?
Oh, sure. Yes, absolutely. And one of the trickiest parts of that, and I'm reflecting that I'm not quite sure how to teach at the next level up to be the instructor, how to teach our listeners how to have this characteristic. But the characteristic you have to have is, and I think this also comes from Aikido and places like that, is a sort of beginner's mind. You have to be able
Yes.
to think about calculus or pair programming or skiing as if you had never done it before, but you are a super duper expert. You know a lot about it. And that is a very tricky skill, technique to apply. The one hint I can give is imagine that you have to um, write instructions for someone on how to do this activity, and you will never see them. You will never interact with them. You can't show them. You can't move your hands. You can't type. You can't do the actual action yourself. And the act of writing can force you to come up with something like that. Now, that's not what I used to come up with Squirrelmobile, and that's not what I used to come up with things like, how to apply elephant carpaccio, which is Alistair Coburn's idea originally. He gave the name to the technique, and then I came up with a lot of tools around it. But all of those sorts of things, disappointing people helpfully, our notions like coherence busting, you know, uh, that when we wrote our book, that helped force us to come up with some of those names, but we had come up with them before. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm going to have to reflect on this. I'm not sure I know exactly how I do this thing that allows me to have a beginner's mind. And so what I'm telling people is try to have it, but I'm not sure I can tell you how to do it.
It'd be interesting to hear from our listeners of
Oh, yeah.
scenarios where maybe they're struggling to teach people. There's something they know that maybe they're in their role as a leader, they're trying to coach a team or have them develop a skill, It might be interesting to hear from people of where they have struggled or succeeded, and maybe if they have a technique that they use to come up with elements to instruct. It'd be very interesting to see if we can construct a kind of meta toolkit of how you can develop the sort of beginner's mind, the empathy for the person of the level that they're at. And I think one of the challenges, as you're describing it, is that different students will struggle at different parts. Some things, two different students, one thing will come naturally to one, and the other one uh, um, will struggle with it, and vice versa as you move along. And so I think it'd be very interesting to kind of collect examples like this where people have struggled and also where people have solved them. So maybe people have come up with some very um, productive ways to teach skills to people, and they feel like they've encountered this. I'd be interested in collect success cases as well. So yeah, I'd love to hear from our listeners because I feel like they must have a plethora of examples out there.
And that includes examples that didn't work, because that's one other thing that I think I can point to, which is understanding failure modes and how people fall off their skis. And do they always fall off to the left? That might mean that they're having a certain type of difficulty, and that's then you can give a name. Don't lean left or something. You'd
Yeah.
probably come up with a much better name if you knew anything about skiing, which I don't. So, listeners, we would sure like to hear about your success stories with teaching people something, having that beginner's mind. How did you break it down? And your failure modes. How did you try to teach someone and it just fell over and they couldn't get it? You're great at it, but they aren't. So those are our two areas of interest for this particular podcast. And of course, the way to get in touch with us is to head on over to agileconversations.com. There you'll find, by the way, our book and videos from us and all kinds of other stuff. All the material on the website is free, of course, because we like giving things back to you, our listeners. And what you'll also find there is email and I don't know, we're probably on Discord or Sora or I don't know what else. And we'd sure like to hear from you on any of those communication channels on today's topic. Of course, the other way to keep in touch with us is to come back again next week when we'll have another episode of Troubleshooting Agile. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Squirrel.